buried alive inside the boiling steel of a nuclear supercarrier. A tiny squad of sailors fights a relentless war against tons of hazardous waste. No sunlight, no metals, just crushing heat, toxic fumes, and the terrifying reality that a single floating garbage bag could give an enemy submarine the exact coordinates to sink them all. So, how do these unsung heroes physically melt, crush, and obliterate a floating city's decay without blowing up a multi-billion-dollar flagship? Let's step below deck to witness unbreakable human spirit that make this impossible mission a reality. Right now, somewhere in the hostile, contested swells of the Philippine Sea, a 100,000-ton American supercarrier is fighting a terrifying, invisible war against its own internal biology. Aboard the USS Ronald Reagan CVN-76, a floating nuclear fortress packed with 5,200 elite warfighters, human existence is generating a staggering 3,000 pounds of solid waste and over 410,000 gallons of toxic sewage every single day. That is enough refuse to fill 6 commercial dumpsters to the absolute brim, trapped inside a pressurized steel labyrinth the size of the Chrysler Building. But here's the mind-bending reality that completely shatters civilian logic, despite being surrounded by 60 million square miles of open Pacific Ocean. Not a single crushed aluminum can, hazardous chemical rag, or rotting apple core can simply be tossed overboard. To a civilian mind, dumping garbage is merely a gross environmental violation, but to a carrier strike group commander, it is an act of absolute tactical suicide. In the ultra-lethal hypersensory theater of modern naval warfare, dropping unprocessed waste creates a highly trackable physical breadcrumb trail right to the carrier's hull. A cluster of floating plastic MRE pouches or a microscopic oil slick from avionics maintenance can easily be pinpointed by the ultra-sensitive wake-homing sonar of a lurking Russian Yasin M-class submarine. One careless bag of trash does not just pollute the water. It arms the enemy with the exact coordinates needed to sink a $13 billion flagship and kill 5,000 American sailors. Beyond the lethal threat of enemy torpedoes, the United States Navy operates under the merciless legal guillotine of MARPOL Annex 5, an international maritime treaty that mandates an absolute zero-tolerance policy for plastic discharge. But for the Navy, compliance is fundamentally about sheer, brutal combat endurance. A supercarrier operates on a razor-thin margin of spatial economics, where every cubic inch of the lower decks is meticulously calculated to store explosive ordnance, JP-5 aviation fuel, and precision radar components. If the internal waste matrix fails, this daily 3-ton influx of trash rapidly mutates into a parasitic tumor, suffocating the ship's magazines and forcing a multi-billion-dollar warship to abandon its geopolitical mission just to empty its trash cans. To prevent this catastrophic operational paralysis, you must descend 7 decks below the deafening, bone-rattling catapult launches into a 115-degree subterranean hellscape. Here, bathed in the harsh glare of fluorescent lighting and the relentless, skull-vibrating hum of twin A4W nuclear reactors, you will find the unsung warriors of the S-3 division. These brutally exhausted, highly specialized sailors fight a relentless 24-hour siege against a never-ending avalanche of decay. Operating flesh-tearing industrial crushers and thermal melters in spaces so cramped they can barely fully extend their arms. They execute a zero-defect mission with terrifying, mechanized precision. These men and women do not wear glamorous G-suits or command multi-million-dollar Aegis radar screens. Yet their grueling daily sacrifice is the absolute heartbeat of American naval supremacy. They manually sort, shred, melt, and sanitize a highly toxic cocktail of hazardous military refuse, inhaling the stomach-turning fumes of rotting organics and melting polymers for up to 14 grueling hours a shift. Their unsung heroism ensures that this floating city remains a stealthy, lethal phantom, leaving zero trace of its existence in highly contested waters. Without their lung-burning sacrifices in the suffocating belly of the beast, America's greatest instrument of global power projection would instantly grind to a toxic halt. But how exactly do these subterranean warriors physically vaporize, crush, and sanitize mountains of hazardous military waste inside a pressurized metal tube without blowing themselves up? Inside the claustrophobic 110-degree sorting compartments of the S-3 division, a highly specialized 16-person strike team engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand war against the carrier's daily refuse. Affectionately yet grimly dubbed the Raccoons, these sailors rip open up to 1,500 sealed trash bags every 24 hours, manually sifting through the visceral remnants of 5,000 war fighters. They are not merely separating half-eaten chow and coffee grounds. They are hunting for catastrophic hazards like discarded lithium-ion batteries, unauthorized classified schematics, or jagged titanium aviation shards. A single AA battery mistakenly tossed into a high-speed industrial shredder could trigger a thermal runaway fire, instantly weaponizing a room packed with combustible material deep inside a nuclear vessel. Once meticulously segregated, mountains of organic food scraps and biodegradable paper are hauled toward the vessel's industrial pulper, a terrifying mechanical stomach powered by heavy-duty 50-horsepower electric motors. This aquatic wood chipper violently pulverizes up to 4,000 pounds of daily food waste, brutally tearing cellular structures apart until no single particle exceeds a strict, legally mandated 12-millimeter diameter. High-velocity pumps then blast this pulverized matter with thousands of gallons of pressurized seawater, transforming the solid waste into a dense, rapid-decaying biological slurry.
When the ship's navigator confirms the vessel is strictly beyond the 3 nautical mile international threshold, this nutrient-dense paste is violently expelled below the waterline, engineered to be instantly consumed by marine microorganisms before it can ever float to the surface. However, soft organics are child's play compared to the logistical nightmare of heavily contaminated, combustible materials like splintered oak pallets, hydraulic-soaked rags, and biohazardous medical waste. To neutralize this threat, S-3 engineers operate colossal, marine-grade incinerators that roar to a hellish, flesh-melting 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature hot enough to instantly vaporize complex hydrocarbons. Operating these thermal beasts requires sailors to don heavy, aluminized, fire-retardant proximity suits, enduring blistering radiant heat while feeding fuel into a roaring furnace on a flight deck that might be violently pitching in 20-foot sea swells. Once the supercarrier crosses the strict 12 nautical mile boundary, the resulting sterile, ultrafine microscopic ash is legally flushed into the oceanic abyss, leaving absolutely zero acoustic or optical trace. Dealing with jagged, unyielding metals and shattered glass requires a terrifying application of sheer mechanical violence that deafens anyone standing within a 30-foot radius. Sailors feed empty tin cans, stripped copper wiring, and broken optical glass into industrial shredders armed with hardened tungsten carbide teeth, generating thousands of pounds of torque to violently tear the materials apart. This bone-rattling symphony of destruction transforms bulky, hazardous scrap into incredibly dense, razor-sharp fragments that are meticulously packed into heavy-duty, biodegradable burlap sacks. When the Nimitz-class behemoth reaches deep, open ocean waters exactly 25 nautical miles from any sovereign coastline, these weighted burlap coffins are jettisoned overboard, designed to sink like stones to the lightless ocean floor to prevent stray sonar reflections. Despite these brutal, highly effective methods, there is one category of waste that remains the ultimate, unforgiving enemy of the entire carrier strike group tactical plastics. From miles of shrink-wrapped Tomahawk missile pallets to an endless avalanche of MRE pouches, plastic is the most abundant and lethal logistical byproduct of a deployed American combat force. Under the draconian MARPOL Annex 5 maritime regulations, throwing even a single microscopic shard of polymer into the ocean is a federal crime punishable by severe international sanctions.
The only legal exception is a catastrophic, hull-breaching emergency, where the immediate survival of the crew overrides global environmental law, a scenario fleet commanders will do anything to avoid. To combat this indestructible polymer threat without triggering an international diplomatic crisis, the Navy engineered a multi-million-dollar piece of hardware known as the Compressed Melt Unit, or CMU. This colossal machine is not a simple trash compactor. It is a highly advanced thermal kinetic weapon designed to completely neutralize the volumetric footprint of plastic waste. Sailors manually feed hundreds of pounds of contaminated plastic into the CMU's gaping steel maw, where the machine first blasts the raw material with scalding water to strip away toxic residue. It then aggressively shreds the material into microscopic polymer flakes, preparing the resilient plastic for a violent, irreversible thermal transformation. Once shredded, the plastic enters a terrifying thermal chamber where it is flash heated to 350 degrees, while a massive hydraulic ram slams down with a bone-crushing pressure of thousands of pounds per square inch. This sheer mechanical violence hypercompresses the hot, semi-liquid plastic mass, reducing the bulky, suffocating trash by an astonishing ratio of 30-to-1. The final product spat out by the CMU is a rock-solid, completely sterile plastic disc measuring exactly 20 inches across and 4 inches thick, weighing roughly 10 pounds each. Because they cannot be dumped at sea, thousands of these heavy plastic pucks must be hoarded on board, forcing sailors to play a terrifying, high-stakes game of three-dimensional Tetris inside the lower cargo bays, effectively turning the warship into a floating, combustible plastic warehouse.
But while shredding steel and melting thousands of pounds of plastic is a mechanical marvel, it absolutely pales in comparison to the horrifying, multi-million-dollar biological catastrophe lurking inside the warship's pressurized sewage pipes. Every 24 hours, the 5,000 warfighters aboard a supercarrier generate a relentless wave of 410,000 gallons of raw, untreated black water. This is not merely maritime plumbing. It is a highly volatile biological weapon trapped inside a sealed nuclear vessel. If mismanaged, rotting effluent violently produces lethal concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and explosive methane gas. To prevent the crew from being silently asphyxiated, architects engineered a subterranean multi-million-dollar labyrinth, a pressurized titanium known as the Collection, Holding, and Transfer System, or CHT. Calling the CHT a simple sewage network insults the brutal engineering required to sanitize a floating metropolis. It is a classified, combat-hardened water treatment facility violently compressed into the 110-degree bowels of a warship. Raw effluent is forced through high-capacity sediment tanks, aggressively aerated in bioreactors, and blasted with chemical sterilization agents. Only when the onboard liquid is proven 100% sterile and the warship crosses the strict 4 nautical mile international boundary, do massive pneumatic pumps violently eject the purified water back into the ocean. Pushing fluid dynamics inside a combat zone often results in eye-watering financial nightmares. The USS Gerald R. Ford CVN-78 suffered from a mathematically flawed plumbing design where the titanium piping was engineered too narrow for 4,500 sailors. When this network inevitably chokes on tactical debris, desperate crews execute a Chemical Scorched-Earth protocol, flushing the entire labyrinth with thousands of gallons of corrosive industrial acids. The staggering taxpayer cost for just one of these fleet-paralyzing chemical flushes is a mind-numbing $400,000 per treatment. Older Nimitz-class supercarriers face a highly volatile mechanical beast relying on unbroken pneumatic perfection. Aboard the USS George H.W. Bush CVN-77, the system operates on a terrifyingly fragile vacuum network of over 250 miles of pressurized piping snaking through steel bulkheads. If an exhausted sailor flushes an unauthorized fabric rag or rigid plastic cap, it instantly breaches the vacuum seal, triggering a catastrophic pressure cascade in seconds. A single millimeter of lost atmospheric pressure renders every toilet across the 1,092-foot flagship completely paralyzed. During a harrowing 2011 combat deployment, the USS George H.W. Bush suffered multiple catastrophic vacuum collapses that pushed the crew to their absolute psychological limits.
With 5,000 warfighters denied latrine access, desperate sailors were forced into the humiliation of using industrial deck sinks and shower drains as makeshift toilets. Below deck, maintenance technicians fought a literal 35-hour biological siege, wading through knee-deep toxic raw sewage in sweltering 100-degree heat to extract a microscopic blockage. This proved a multi-billion-dollar carrier strike group can be crippled by garbage. To permanently eradicate these vulnerabilities, the Navy unleashed the ultimate sci-fi weapon of waste destruction, the Plasma Arc Waste Destruction System, installed exclusively on the newest Ford-class behemoths. This multi-million-dollar reactor violently rips apart the molecular bonds of physical matter using a contained plasma torch, firing at a flesh-vaporizing 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This artificial lightning instantly transforms hazardous organics into microscopic synthetic gas and inert glass slag.
It ensures zero harmful emissions or trackable acoustic debris ever leave the hull to alert enemy hydrophones. Yet, even with plasma torches, a supercarrier cannot hoard thousands of 10-pound plastic pucks and dense metal coffins indefinitely. The warship must physically purge this logistical tumor to a supply command vessel in a highly dangerous maneuver known as underway replenishment. In the treacherous open ocean, two colossal leviathans match speeds at exactly 15 knots, steaming side by side with less than 150 feet of churning water separating their unyielding hulls. It is a terrifying maritime ballet where a single helmsman's miscalculation results in a ship-crushing collision. During this perilous maneuver, heavily tensioned steel cables are fired across the gap, creating a fragile zipline over the oceanic abyss.
Deck crews, battered by rogue 20-foot swells and blinding winds. Manually hook pallets loaded with 300-pound barrels of compressed metallic waste onto the swinging rigging. If a hydraulic winch catastrophically fails under the kinetic load, the payload instantly transforms into a swinging guillotine. This flying mass of compressed trash is fully capable of crushing an unwary sailor or tearing through a parked F/A-18 Super Hornet. But surviving the flesh-tearing dangers of an underway replenishment is only half the battle. The true existential terror begins when the carrier realizes this massive logistical transfer has just broadcast its exact acoustic coordinates to every enemy-attacked submarine lurking in the dark waters below. During a high-stakes underway replenishment, the aggressive grinding of hydraulic winches and slamming of 300-pound waste barrels create a massive underwater acoustic shockwave.
To the ultra-sensitive sonar of a lurking Chinese Type 039, AUN-class submarine, this mechanical cacophony acts as the ultimate tactical dinner bell. It strips away the supercarrier's meticulously maintained acoustic stealth, broadcasting a multi-frequency sonar signature across hundreds of miles. For the duration of this perilous logistical transfer, the entire armada is left agonizingly vulnerable, forced to sweep the dark depths with active sonar simply because the flagship needed to take out its trash. This extreme tactical vulnerability illustrates why the S-3 Division's subterranean war on garbage is a matter of high-stakes national security. If a Nimitz-class carrier's internal waste systems suffer a catastrophic failure, the commander cannot simply pull into the nearest foreign port to offload 500 tons of rotting refuse.
Diplomatic treaties and host nation environmental laws are unforgiving. Attempting to dump raw combat waste into the pristine allied waters of Yokosuka or Naples would instantly trigger a devastating international incident. An awe-inspiring 100,000-ton American supercarrier could literally be denied port entry, turning America's premier power projection asset into a hostage of its own decaying garbage. Preventing this operational paralysis and diplomatic humiliation falls entirely upon the bruised, exhausted shoulders of just 16 specially trained sailors locked deep inside the hull, while elite FA-18 Super Hornet pilots receive glorious cinematic praise and medals for flying supersonic combat sorties. These unsung logistical sentinels endure a grueling, invisible psychological crucible. They execute brutal 14-hour physical shifts in a claustrophobic, 115-degree environment that permanently reeks of industrial bleach, melting polymers, and suffocating biological decay. Entirely cut off from the fresh ocean air, they relentlessly navigate the extreme physical hazards of heavy industrial crushers without a single complaint. The sheer human sacrifice demanded by this subterranean operation is arguably the most inspiring, untold story of modern American naval supremacy. These men and women operate with bleeding knuckles and aching backs, wrestling with biohazardous titanium shards and hauling 50-pound sacks of pulverized waste while the steel deck violently pitches in 20-foot sea swells. They are the ultimate embodiment of the little guy, carrying the weight of a $13 billion empire, fully aware that a single sorting error could compromise the safety of 5,000 shipmates. Their quiet, unbreakable discipline proves that true military heroism often wears heavy-duty rubber gloves. From this dark, punishing hellscape emerges one of the most profound geopolitical paradoxes of the modern era. The United States Navy, operating the most lethal engines of war ever conceived, is simultaneously the ocean's most rigorous environmental guardian. While civilian commercial shipping conglomerates carelessly hemorrhage over 8 million tons of toxic plastic into the fragile marine ecosystem every single year. A heavily armed supercarrier leaves absolutely zero permanent footprint. These subterranean warfighters do not just operate complex military hardware, they are frontline conservationists, proving that absolute military might and strict environmental responsibility can coexist flawlessly. Maintaining this zero-defect standard of global environmental stewardship requires a colossal financial hemorrhage that the Pentagon willingly absorbs. The daily operational budget, just to keep the 2,000-degree incinerators burning, the PAWDS plasma torches firing, and the heavy mechanical crushers turning runs into the tens of millions of dollars over a standard combat deployment.
Replacing a jammed tungsten carbide shredder blade or repairing a catastrophic vacuum sewage collapse consumes a massive portion of the ship's maintenance logistics. However, compared to the geopolitical disaster of an international maritime lawsuit or leaving a sonar reflective trash trail, it is a necessary strategic task. The next time you watch awe-inspiring footage of a supersonic fighter jet launching off the steaming magnetic catapult of a nuclear supercarrier, look past the glorious flight deck. Remember the 16 unsung, sweat-drenched raccoons of the S-3 division fighting a relentless, invisible war in the suffocating belly of the beast to make that precise launch mathematically possible. They are the absolute bedrock of American maritime supremacy. The silent heroes ensuring our fleet leaves nothing behind but the uncompromising defense of global freedom. If this deep dive into the hidden logistics of the U.S.
Navy blew your mind, smash that subscribe button, hit the like, and sound off with your respect for these sailors in the comments below.